She looked me dead in the eyes and smirked. I had a one-night thing, and I'd do it again. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I just nodded and finished my meal. By morning, when she expected her usual coffee in bed, she got something she never imagined. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of silverware against ceramic. It was 11 at night, too late for dinner by most standards, but our schedules had never aligned properly. I'd gotten home from work at 9:30, exhausted from back-to-back meetings and a project deadline that seemed to shift further away the closer I got to it. My boss had kept us in conference room B until well past 7, going over quarterly projections that could have been an email. By the time I'd wrapped up and driven through rush hour traffic that wasn't supposed to exist at that hour, I was running on fumes. Serena had been scrolling through her phone on the couch when I walked in, barely acknowledging my presence with a half-hearted "hey" that didn't require a response. The blue light from her screen had illuminated her face in the darkened living room, casting shadows that made her look like a stranger. I'd paused in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, waiting for more. A "how was your day?" or "I'm glad you're home," or even just eye contact. But she'd kept scrolling, her thumb moving in that mindless rhythm that suggested she wasn't even really reading whatever was on the screen. She was just existing, somewhere far away from me. I'd made myself a simple meal, leftover chicken, some rice, a handful of vegetables I'd roasted the night before. Nothing fancy, nothing that required thought. I was operating on autopilot, the kind of functional exhaustion where your body goes through the motions while your mind floats somewhere else entirely. The chicken had dried out slightly in the microwave, the edges tough and rubbery, but I didn't care. Food was fuel. That's all this was. I'd stood at the kitchen counter while the microwave hummed, watching the plate rotate behind the foggy glass door, and wondered when eating had become such a solitary act in a house with two people. We used to cook together on weekends, used to make elaborate meals and laugh over burnt garlic and oversalted pasta. We used to sit at the table for hours, talking about everything and nothing, our conversations meandering through dreams and fears and stupid observations about the world. When had that stopped? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had been gradual, like watching a photograph fade in sunlight, so slow you don't notice until one day you look at it and realize you can barely make out the faces anymore. The kitchen had this warm, dim lighting that Serena had insisted on installing 2 years ago. She said it made the space feel cozy, intimate. Right now, it just made everything feel heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on my shoulders. I sat at the small kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store downtown, the one where she'd spent 45 minutes debating between oak and walnut before settling on something in between. The salesman had been so patient, bringing out sample after sample while Serena ran her hands over each surface, testing the grain, checking how the light hit it from different angles. I remembered thinking it didn't matter, that we'd make memories at whatever table we chose. Funny how those small decisions feel monumental at the time, then fade into nothing but regret and receipts. The table was scratched now, marked by 4 years of daily life, a gouge from when we'd moved in and Serena had dropped her keys while carrying a box, a water ring from the time I'd set down a cold glass without a coaster and she'd gotten irritated with me for 2 days. Evidence of us carved into wood that would probably outlast the marriage. Serena had wandered in about 10 minutes after I'd started eating. She made herself a bowl of cereal, her go-to meal when she didn't feel like cooking or reheating anything. Lucky Charms, of all things. Something about seeing a 34-year-old woman eating children's cereal at 11 at night struck me as absurd, but I didn't comment. She poured the milk with deliberate slowness, put the carton back in the fridge, grabbed a spoon from the drawer. Every movement felt calculated, performative, as if she was building up to something. She sat across from me, and for a while, we ate in silence. It wasn't comfortable silence, though. It was the kind of silence that hums with unspoken tension, where every breath feels calculated and every movement is louder than it should be. The scrape of her spoon against the ceramic bowl, the sound of my chewing, the tick of the clock on the wall that I'd never noticed before but suddenly seemed deafening. I kept my eyes on my plate, mechanically moving fork to mouth, chewing, swallowing. But I could feel her watching me. That prickle on your skin when someone's stare is so intense, it's almost physical. I didn't look up. Part of me didn't want to engage, didn't want to invite whatever was brewing across the table. Another part of me already knew something was coming. You develop instincts in a marriage, can read the shifts in atmospheric pressure that signal an incoming storm. She'd been distant for weeks. Cold, even. I'd noticed it, but hadn't pushed. I figured everyone goes through phases in a marriage. Times when you're not quite in sync, when life gets busy and intimacy takes a back seat to survival, work stress, family obligations, the general exhaustion of being an adult in an increasingly demanding world. I thought we'd come out the other side eventually, like we always did. We'd been through rough patches before. 6 months after the wedding, when her father got sick and she withdrew into herself for weeks. A year ago, when I'd lost my job and spent 3 months spiraling into depression while pretending I was fine. We'd survived those storms. I thought we could survive this one too, but looking back now, I could see the signs I'd been deliberately ignoring. The way she'd started putting her phone face down whenever I entered the room. The sudden interest in going to the gym 4 times a week when she'd barely gone 4 times a year before. The new perfume. The lingerie I'd found in the laundry that I'd never seen her wear for me. The nights she came home late with vague explanations about drinks with colleagues whose names she could never quite remember. I'd told myself I was being paranoid, that suspicion was toxic, that trust was the foundation of marriage. I'd been so determined not to be that person, the jealous, controlling spouse who monitored their partner's every move, that I'd ignored every red flag waving frantically in my peripheral vision. I was wrong. Serena set her spoon down with a deliberate clink that made me look up. She wasn't eating anymore. She was just watching me, her expression unreadable except for this faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, not quite a sneer, something in between that made my stomach tighten without knowing why. "Daniel," she said, her voice cutting through the silence with an edge I hadn't heard before. I swallowed my bite of chicken and met her eyes. "Yeah?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest. The smirk grew wider, more defined. There was something almost theatrical about it, like she'd been rehearsing this moment in her head and was finally ready to perform. "I had a one-night thing last month," she said, each word measured and intentional. She paused, letting it sink in, watching my face for any sign of a crack. "And honestly, I'd do it again." The words hung in the air between us like smoke, thick and suffocating. I felt them hit me, not like a punch, but like a weight settling onto my chest, pressing down on my lungs, making each breath require conscious effort. My fork was still in my hand, hovering above my plate, a piece of chicken speared on the tines. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, a dull thud that seemed too loud for the quiet room, too fast for someone who was supposed to be calm. Time did this strange thing where it simultaneously sped up and slowed down. I could see everything with painful clarity. The smirk on Serena's face, the particular shade of lipstick she was wearing, a red I'd never seen on her before, the way her fingers were drumming on the table in what I recognized as barely contained excitement. She was enjoying this. She was getting pleasure from my pain, from the moment before the explosion she was so certain was coming. And in that crystal-clear instant, I understood something I'd been avoiding for months. This marriage was already over. It had ended before I even knew we were in danger. Whatever she'd done, whoever she'd done it with, however many times it had happened, those were just symptoms of a disease that had been eating away at us for far longer. Maybe since the beginning. Maybe we'd been doomed from the start and had just been too in love, too hopeful, too naive to see it. She was staring at me, waiting, expecting something, a reaction, an explosion, tears, shouting, begging. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted chaos. She wanted me to break down, to give her the satisfaction of knowing she could still affect me that deeply. But something strange happened in that moment. Instead of feeling rage or devastation, I felt clarity. Like a fog I hadn't even realized was there suddenly lifted, and I could see everything for what it really was. This wasn't a confession born from guilt or a desire for honesty. This was a weapon. She was trying to hurt me, to provoke me, to make me react in a way that would justify whatever narrative she'd already constructed in her mind. So I didn't give her what she wanted. I looked down at my plate, cut another piece of chicken, and put it in my mouth. I chewed slowly, deliberately. The taste barely registered. I swallowed, took a sip of water, and nodded. "Okay," I said. That was it, one word. Calm, neutral, final. Serena's smirk faltered. Just for a second, but I saw it. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something that looked almost like frustration. "Okay," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "That's all you have to say?" I set my fork down carefully, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and looked at her again. "What do you want me to say, Serena?" She blinked, clearly thrown off. I just told you I cheated on you. I told you I'd do it again, and you're just sitting there?" "I heard you," I said evenly. "I'm not deaf." "But you're not even angry." I considered that for a moment. Was I angry? Yes. Somewhere deep down, beneath the shock and the strange calm that had settled over me, there was anger. But it wasn't the explosive, destructive kind she was expecting. It was cold, calculating, purposeful. Would getting angry change anything? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. I picked up my fork again and took another bite. The act of eating felt absurd, mechanical, but I needed something to do with my hands, something to ground me while my entire world quietly rearranged itself. Sometimes the loudest reaction is none at all. Serena wasn't done. I could see it in the way she shifted in her chair, in the way her jaw tightened. She'd thrown her grenade and it hadn't exploded the way she'd planned. Now she was scrambling, trying to find the right words to detonate the situation manually. He made me feel alive, she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. He made me feel wanted, desired, things you haven't made me feel in a long time. I kept eating. Each bite was an act of defiance, though I doubt she understood that. Are you even listening to me? She demanded. I'm listening, I said quietly. Then say something. I set my fork down again and looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman I'd shared a life with for 6 years, married for 4. I'd loved her. I'd built dreams with her. I'd imagined growing old with her, navigating life's challenges together, being each other's constant in a world that was always changing. But the woman sitting across from me now wasn't my partner. She was a stranger wearing a familiar face, speaking words designed to wound rather than heal, to destroy rather than repair. Unlike you, she added, the words dripping with contempt. Maybe I should have just stayed with him. Maybe I still should. There it was, the final twist of the knife. She wanted me to beg, to plead with her to stay, to choose me, to prove that I still cared enough to fight for us. But you can't fight for something that's already dead. And in that moment, sitting in our kitchen with its warm, dim lighting and its carefully chosen table, I realized our marriage had been dead for longer than I'd wanted to admit. Maybe it had died weeks ago, maybe months. Maybe it had been dying slowly, quietly, and I'd been too busy or too hopeful to notice. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the floor. I picked up my plate and walked to the sink. I scraped the remaining food into the garbage disposal, rinsed the plate under warm water, and placed it carefully in the dishwasher. Each movement was deliberate, methodical. Serena watched me from the table, her expression shifting from frustration to something that looked almost like unease. I closed the dishwasher, dried my hands on a kitchen towel, and turned to face her. Good night, Serena, I said softly. Then I walked out of the kitchen. I could hear her behind me, still sitting at the table, probably still trying to process what had just happened. Or rather, what hadn't happened. I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. The bedroom looked the same as it always did. The bed we'd shared for years, made neatly because Serena insisted on making it every morning. The dresser with my clothes on the left side, hers on the right. The framed photos on the nightstand. Our wedding day, a vacation in Italy. A candid shot from a friend's barbecue where we were both laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. I didn't get into bed. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a large duffel bag I'd used for gym clothes. I set it on the bed and started packing. Clothes first. Enough for a week, maybe 2. Underwear, socks, jeans, shirts, a jacket. I moved quietly but efficiently, my hands working while my mind raced ahead, planning, calculating, preparing for what came next. I gathered my personal documents from the file cabinet in the corner of the room: birth certificate, passport, social security card, insurance papers. I unplugged my laptop from the charger and slid it into my work bag along with the charger and my external hard drive. Photos from before we were married, a few books that had been mine long before we'd merged our lives. I could hear Serena moving around downstairs, water running, cabinets opening and closing, the television turning on, normal sounds from an abnormal night. By 2 a.m, I'd packed everything essential. The duffel bag sat by the door, ready to go. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Our finances had always been partially joint, partially separate, a compromise we'd reached early in our marriage. We had a shared account for household expenses and a shared savings account, but we each maintained our own checking accounts for personal spending. It had worked well. Until now. I transferred every penny from the shared accounts that I'd contributed to my personal account. I didn't touch her money, only what was rightfully mine. Then I removed my name from the shared accounts entirely. The process took 15 minutes and felt oddly anticlimactic for something that represented the financial dissolution of a marriage. Next, I composed an email to my lawyer, Mitchell, a guy I'd gone to college with who'd transitioned from corporate law to family law 5 years ago. We'd stayed in touch, grabbing lunch occasionally, trading stories about work and life. I never thought I'd need his services. The email was brief and to the point. Mitchell, I need to file for divorce. My wife admitted to infidelity tonight and stated she would do it again. I'm prepared to move forward immediately. Can we meet this week? Daniel, I sent it at 2:17 a.m. I didn't expect a response until morning, but just hitting send felt like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, at the room, at the life I was preparing to leave behind. There was no going back from this, no reconciliation, no couples therapy, no trying to work through it. Serena had made her choice when she spoke those words, and now I was making mine. She wanted a reaction. Instead, she got preparation. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows, every distant car passing on the street, all of it amplified in the darkness. My mind was racing, running through scenarios, calculating possibilities, planning logistics. Where would I stay? How would I separate our finances? What would I tell my family, our friends, my coworkers? Serena had eventually come upstairs around 1:30, moving quietly through the hallway, her footsteps soft and tentative. She was probably assuming I was asleep, or maybe she was hoping I was, avoiding the confrontation that hadn't happened yet but still loomed in the space between us. She'd gone into the bathroom, and I'd heard the water running, the electric toothbrush buzzing, the medicine cabinet opening and closing, normal sounds from an abnormal night. She'd gotten into bed on her side, the mattress dipping with her weight, and I'd kept my eyes closed, my breathing even, pretending to be deeply asleep. The distance between us in that bed felt infinite. 6 inches of mattress might as well have been an ocean, a canyon, the cold vacuum of space. I could feel the heat from her body, but we weren't touching. We hadn't touched in weeks. Maybe that should have been the clearest sign of all. Around 5:30 in the morning, I heard my phone vibrate with an email notification. Mitchell had responded, "Daniel, I'm sorry to hear this. Yes, let's meet. I have an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. if that works for you. Bring any documentation you have regarding assets, income, and the circumstances you mentioned. We'll discuss your options." "Mitch," I replied, confirming the appointment, then quietly got out of bed. Serena stirred but didn't wake. I grabbed my bags from where I'd hidden them in the closet and carried them downstairs as silently as possible. The kitchen looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, less warm, more stark. I could still see our plates from last night in the dishwasher, the table where everything had unraveled. I had one more thing to do. Serena's morning routine had been the same for as long as I'd known her, even before we were married. She'd sleep until 7:30, sometimes 8 on weekends, then shuffle downstairs in her pajamas and robe. This plush white thing her mother had given her 2 Christmases ago that made her look like she was wrapped in a cloud. She'd call out for coffee, not even a please, just, "Babe, coffee?" Her signal that she was awake and expecting me to have already made it. It wasn't an ask, it was an expectation, a ritual so ingrained in our daily life that it had become invisible, something I did without thinking, like breathing. I'd bring her a cup, made exactly how she liked it, medium roast, 1 sugar, a splash of cream, not too much, or it would cool it down too fast, not too little, or it would taste bitter. I'd learned the exact measurements in our first month of dating. I'd kiss her forehead, she'd smile sleepily up at me with that soft, vulnerable expression she only had in the mornings before the armor of the day went on, and we'd start our day. Sometimes she'd pull me down for a kiss that tasted like sleep and promise. Sometimes she'd just squeeze my hand in thanks. It was a ritual, a small, intimate routine that had felt loving once, something that connected us in the space between sleeping and waking. It had made me feel needed, important, like I was taking care of her in a way that mattered. Now it just felt like another expectation I'd been fulfilling on autopilot while our marriage quietly rotted from the inside, termites eating away at the foundation while I kept painting the exterior. I made the coffee. I made it perfectly, exactly as she preferred. I poured it into her favorite stainless steel thermos, the one that kept drinks hot for hours, the one she'd gotten as a gift from her sister. I sealed it tight and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared during the night. Inside were the divorce papers Mitchell had sent me months ago during a conversation that had started as hypothetical. "Just in case you ever need them," he'd said, half joking. I'd kept them, not because I thought I'd use them, but because I believed in being prepared. Now I was grateful for my own pragmatism. I placed the envelope next to the thermos. And then I wrote a note. Short, simple, final. "Your coffee is in here. Everything else is not." I set the note on top of the envelope where she couldn't miss it. I took one last look at the kitchen, at the house we'd built together, at the life I was walking away from. There was sadness, yes, but more than that, there was relief. A weight lifting, a prison door opening. I picked up my bags, walked out the front door, and closed it quietly behind me. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was cool and clean. I loaded my bags into my car, sat in the driver's seat, and took a deep breath. Then I drove away. I didn't go far at first, just to a hotel about 20 minutes from the house. Far enough to be gone, close enough to be practical. I checked in, brought my bags up to the room, and sat on the edge of the bed that wasn't mine, in a space that held no history, no memories, no weight. My phone was buzzing constantly. I'd turned off the ringer, but I could see the notifications piling up. I ignored them all. At some point, around 8:30, I allowed myself to imagine what was happening back at the house. Serena would wake up slowly, like she always did. She'd stretch, check her phone, then remember last night. Maybe she'd feel smug. Maybe she'd feel anxious. Either way, she'd expect the normal routine to resume, because that's what I always did. I always came back. I always smoothed things over. I was predictable, reliable, safe. She'd call out from the bedroom, "Babe, coffee?" Her voice would echo through the empty house. No response. She'd call again, louder this time, maybe with a hint of irritation. "Daniel?" Still nothing. Finally, she'd get out of bed, pull on her robe, and head downstairs. She'd walk into the kitchen expecting to see me there, or at least evidence that I'd been there. A fresh pot of coffee, breakfast cooking, something. Instead, she'd find the counter, the thermos, the note, the envelope. I imagined her hands shaking as she picked up the note and read it. Her face going pale as she opened the envelope and saw what was inside. The panic setting in as she realized this wasn't a tantrum or a dramatic gesture. This was real. This was final. She broke the marriage trying to get a reaction. She didn't expect silence to break her. The call started around 8:45. I was sitting in my hotel room, drinking mediocre coffee from the in-room maker, when my phone lit up with Serena's name. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. After the fourth call, the text started flooding in. "We need to talk. Daniel, pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. It was just a joke. I was testing you. You're overreacting. Come home." I read each one with a strange sense of detachment. A week ago, those messages might have worked. They might have made me second-guess myself, might have pulled me back into the cycle of accommodating her feelings while neglecting my own, but not anymore. I blocked her number, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I needed space to think, to process, to plan my next steps without the constant barrage of manipulation. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from my mother-in-law, Patricia, her voice tight with concern. "Daniel, Serena called me this morning. She's very upset. She said you left without explanation. I don't know what's going on between you two, but I think you should come home and talk this through like adults. Call me back." I deleted the message. At 11:30, I received an email from Serena using her work account, clearly realizing I'd blocked her personal contact. "Daniel, I don't understand why you're doing this. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said what I said last night. I was angry and I wanted to hurt you, but I didn't mean it. Not really. Please come home so we can talk about this properly. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I love you." The words felt hollow, scripted. The "I love you" at the end felt especially performative, like she thought adding it would somehow undo everything that had come before. I didn't respond. Mitchell called around noon to confirm our meeting for the next morning. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his tone professional but genuinely concerned. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. "Ready to move forward." "Good. That's the right mindset. Bring everything you have tomorrow. We'll make sure this goes as smoothly as possible." After I hung up, I decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head, to move my body, to do something other than sit in a hotel room watching my old life try desperately to pull me back in. I was walking through a park near the hotel when I got a call from my office. It was Karen from HR. "Daniel, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a woman here named Serena who says she's your wife. She's insisting she needs to see you urgently. She says it's an emergency." My stomach tightened. "Karen, I'm dealing with a personal situation. I'm not in the office today, and I've taken personal leave for the rest of the week. Please ask security to escort her out if she refuses to leave voluntarily." There was a pause. "Of course. I'm sorry you're going through something difficult. Take care of yourself, Daniel." "Thank you, Karen." I could picture it. Serena showing up at my workplace, probably disheveled and emotional, making a scene in the lobby, demanding to see me, perhaps even causing enough of a disruption that security would need to get involved. It was humiliating for both of us, but it was her choice. I'd already made mine. By mid-afternoon, the attempts to reach me had escalated. I received messages from mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, all with variations of the same theme. "Hey man, heard you and Serena are having some trouble. She's really worried about you. Maybe give her a call?" I didn't respond to any of them. This was between Serena and me, and I wasn't interested in having our private matters litigated through a network of well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful intermediaries. Around 5 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Daniel?" It was Serena's voice, shaky and hoarse, like she'd been crying. "Please don't hang up." "How did you get this number?" I asked calmly. "I called the hotel. I figured you'd go somewhere close. I tried 3 places before I found the right one. Daniel, please, I need to talk to you." "We don't have anything to talk about, Serena." "Yes, we do. I made a mistake. I was angry and stupid and I said things I didn't mean. But you can't just throw away 4 years of marriage over one conversation." "I'm not throwing away anything," I said quietly. "You already did that when you cheated, and when you told me you'd do it again." "I wouldn't. I swear, I wouldn't. I was just trying to... I don't know. I wanted you to react, to show me that you still cared." "So you hurt me intentionally to test whether I loved you?" I felt anger creeping into my voice for the first time. "Do you understand how toxic that is?" I know it was wrong. But Daniel, we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work through this together." "No, Serena, we can't. Because you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice, and then you made another choice to tell me about it in the most hurtful way possible. And then you made a third choice to tell me you'd do it again. Those weren't accidents. Those were deliberate actions." "Daniel..." "I'm done, Serena. My lawyer has the divorce papers. You'll be served formally within the week. I suggest you get your own attorney." "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." There was silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of her breathing, uneven and desperate. "You're really leaving me," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Over this?" "No," I corrected her. "You left the marriage the moment you decided someone else was more important than our vows. I'm just making it official." I hung up before she could respond. That night, alone in my hotel room, I felt the full weight of everything that had happened. The end of a marriage, the death of plans and dreams, and the future we'd imagined together. It hurt. It hurt like hell. But beneath the hurt was something else. Something that felt like the first clean breath after being underwater too long. She had broken the marriage trying to get a reaction. She didn't expect silence to break her. But more than that, she hadn't expected silence to free me. 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls with lawyers, and the strange process of disentangling a shared life. Mitchell was efficient and compassionate, handling the legal complexities while checking in on my emotional state regularly. "You're handling this better than most people do," he told me during one of our meetings. "That's good. It means you've processed the decision and you're not looking back." He was right. I wasn't looking back. Every day felt clearer than the one before, like I was slowly coming back into focus after years of being slightly blurred. Serena had hired her own lawyer, a woman named Rebecca Chen, who had a reputation for being aggressive in divorce proceedings. I wasn't surprised. Serena would want someone who fought hard, who didn't take no for an answer, who could maybe spin this situation into something that wasn't entirely her fault. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at Mitchell's office. Neutral ground. Professional setting. Mitchell had warned me it would be tense, that Serena might try to appeal to my emotions, that her lawyer might try various tactics to delay or complicate the proceedings. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a suit, carrying a folder with all my documentation. Mitchell greeted me in the lobby with a firm handshake. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I confirmed. Serena and Rebecca arrived right on time. I saw them through the glass doors before they entered. Serena looked smaller somehow, diminished. She was wearing a dark dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked tired, fragile. It was clearly intentional, a presentation designed to evoke sympathy. Our eyes met briefly as they walked into the conference room. I kept my expression neutral. We sat across from each other at a long table, Mitchell and me on one side, Rebecca and Serena on the other. The formality of it felt surreal, like we were business adversaries rather than two people who'd once loved each other. Rebecca started with the standard opening, outlining her client's position, suggesting that perhaps mediation would be more appropriate than immediate divorce, hinting that there were complicating factors that needed to be discussed. Mitchell countered smoothly, presenting the facts. Infidelity, admitted and unrepentant, with no interest from my side in reconciliation. Back and forth they went, speaking about us like we weren't in the room, like our marriage was just another case file to be processed and closed. I barely listened to the legal jargon. I was watching Serena. Her hands were clasped tightly on the table in front of her, her knuckles white. She kept glancing at me, then looking away quickly, like she couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second. About 20 minutes into the meeting, Rebecca suggested a brief recess so she could speak privately with her client. Mitchell agreed, and the two lawyers stepped out of the room, leaving Serena and me alone. The silence was deafening. Finally, Serena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel." I looked at her but said nothing. "We can fix this," she said, the words tumbling out quickly, desperately. "Can't we? We can go to counseling. We can work through what happened. We can rebuild trust. It doesn't have to end like this." "Yes, it does," I said quietly. "Why? Because I made one mistake? Because I said something stupid when I was angry?" "You didn't make one mistake, Serena. You made several. And the biggest one wasn't the cheating. It was telling me you'd do it again." Her face crumpled. "I wouldn't. I swear to you I wouldn't. I was just trying to hurt you because I felt like you weren't paying attention to me anymore, like I'd become invisible in your life. So instead of communicating that like an adult, you cheated, and then you weaponized it. I know it was wrong. But Daniel, 4 years of marriage, means nothing," I interrupted, "if you're willing to throw it away the moment you feel neglected. What happens 5 years from now when life gets hard again? 10 years? Do you cheat again and then tell me about it to get my attention?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "No, I've learned my lesson. I'll never do anything like this again." "I believe you," I said, and I did. "I believe you've learned something from this. But that doesn't change the fact that I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, we have nothing. We have history, we have good memories, we have a past," I said. "That's all." She stared at me, her eyes red and desperate. "You've really made up your mind. You're really done." "I'm really done." "I don't understand how you can just turn off your feelings like that, how you can just stop loving someone." "I didn't stop loving you, Serena. You made it impossible for me to continue loving you. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the lawyers returned. The meeting resumed, and over the next hour, we worked through the division of assets. Straightforward, since we'd kept most things separate and had no children. The house would be sold, profits split evenly. Shared possessions would be divided fairly. No alimony on either side, since we both had careers and earned comparable incomes. It was all very civilized, very neat, very final. As the meeting was wrapping up, Rebecca asked if there were any final concerns or questions. Mitchell looked at me. I shook my head, but Serena wasn't ready to let go. "Daniel," she said, her voice breaking as the lawyers gathered their papers. "We can fix this, can't we, right?" Everyone stopped. The room fell silent. Rebecca put a gentle hand on her client's arm, a silent signal to stop talking, but Serena shook it off. "We can still fix this," she repeated, looking directly at me now, her face a mask of desperation. "Right?" I held her gaze. I saw the woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd imagined growing old with. I saw all of that, and I also saw the woman who'd deliberately hurt me, who'd chosen cruelty over communication, who'd burned down everything we'd built and expected me to help her put out the flames. I kept my voice calm, steady, unbroken. "You already told me you'd do it again," I said. "I'm just giving you the chance." Her face collapsed. Completely. Utterly. The last thread of hope snapped, and I watched it happen in real time. Rebecca immediately stood, announcing they needed a moment, and guided a sobbing Serena out of the conference room. Mitchell looked at me, a mix of sympathy and approval in his expression. "That was harsh," he said quietly. "But fair." "It's the truth," I said. She told me her intentions. I'm simply respecting them. 20 minutes later, Rebecca returned alone. Her client, she explained, was too distraught to continue and had gone home. They would proceed with the divorce as outlined. No further meetings would be necessary. We signed the preliminary documents, shook hands, scheduled the final court date for 2 months out. A formality, Mitchell assured me, since everything was uncontested, and just like that, it was essentially over. I walked out of Mitchell's building into the afternoon sunlight. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that felt like possibility itself. I took a deep breath, a real one, the kind that fills your lungs completely and reminds you that you're here, you're alive, you're free. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother, who I'd finally told about everything. "How'd it go?" I typed back. "It went. It's done. You okay?" I thought about that for a moment. Was I okay? I'd just spent the afternoon legally ending my marriage. I'd watched my wife break down, and I hadn't wavered. By most standards, this should be one of the worst days of my life. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like release, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long, like stepping out of a dark room into sunlight. "Yeah," I typed back. "I'm okay." And I was. I walked to my car, not the one I'd shared with Serena, but a new one I'd leased the week before, a clean slate. I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed for a moment, processing everything that had happened, everything that had changed. Some people burn a bridge thinking it makes them powerful, like destruction is the same as strength. They light the match believing the flames give them control, that the smoke and ash prove they're the one who made the choice. But Serena hadn't realized something crucial. I was already on the other side. She'd burned the bridge thinking I'd be trapped on her side, desperate and broken, begging to rebuild what she'd destroyed. She'd wanted me to chase after her through the flames, to prove my love by willingness to get burned. Instead, I'd walked across while the wood was still solid, while there was still time to leave with my dignity intact. And when she set it on fire, I was already safe on the other shore, watching the smoke rise and feeling nothing but relief that I'd made it out. She thought the fire made her powerful, but all it did was eliminate her way back to something stable. I wasn't trapped by the burning bridge. She was. I'd walked across it and never looked back. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove toward whatever came next. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also mine. Fully, completely, undeniably mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that felt like enough.